Hello. Um, okay, we're covering a new manga, and I've chosen to do One Punch Man for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, I like One Punch Man, and I felt like rereading it because I haven't read it in ages, and I'm also quite behind. So there'll be, there'll be a pretty good bit of this that's like completely blind. But you know, I've read a large chunk of this before. Um, Everything in this video, everything in the next, 2 or 3 videos as well, is stuff that I've already read. But like, well, here we are. And in terms of what I'm covering here in this video, it's just the first 15 chapters, I'm pretty sure. Is the right number? 15? Yeah. Which I believe is also the entirety of the first saga of One Punch Man. I didn't intend for it to be the first saga. I just decided to stop there because I thought it was the most sensible place to stop. Because it's right before they go join the Hero Association, and there's a whole lot of extra stuff that I would need to talk about with that, which I decided I didn't want to do here. So instead, we're just going to cover this basic stuff, and really all this saga, I guess we'll call it a saga, is it's basically just setup of Saitama's character, his goal and his motivations and his life philosophy, and secondarily to set up a couple of recurring characters, obviously most notably Genos. And for the record, I've not watched the anime, so there could be some terrible pronunciations in here, and for that I apologize, because I am just going off what I'm reading in my head with this one. But hopefully it'll be at least acceptable. So yeah, not too much to cover here, so I don't think it'll take that long. So let's start off. So first chapter of this pretty much is just a little self-contained joke story in a lot of ways. Genuinely, there could be no other chapters, and this would be quite an entertaining little sort of sketch or skit. All that happens is we get this big horrible monster that's like got this complicated plot to destroy the world, and he's got like this complicated motivation, and it doesn't matter what the motivation is, so I'm not going to explain it. I know what it is, but I think it would lessen the analysis if I said, because it doesn't matter. The whole point of the joke is that it doesn't matter, because compared to the strength of Saitama, he is nothing. He's like a bug. And of course we're introduced to Saitama, who shows up and he beats him in one punch. And notably, he also does save a little girl, which I think is an important piece of characterization that maybe goes slightly underappreciated, if I were to assume. But it tells us a lot. Like, he's not just here to beat up people and be the strongest person, he's also here to save lives. Like, he is truly like a superhero in that regard. And I mean, also obviously there's this very simple design. He's basically a circle because he doesn't have any hair, and he's dressed pretty simply. He's dressed very basically for a super and things. He's sort of this stand-in for just strength, I guess, in that regard. But yeah, it's a great first chapter because it sets up everything we need, but it also feels very self-contained, which I think is really impressive, because obviously this wasn't supposed to be a self-contained story. I think there was like a webcomic or something, so it could be that this chapter was the start of the webcomic and then it just got converted over, which would probably make more sense as to why it's so self-contained. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a really great way of starting this. And the next couple of chapters are all these own like little self-contained one-off encounters between Saitama and other people. Though in the second chapter, it's more of an origin story because we learn why he's as strong as he is and why he decided to become as strong as he is, because he achieved it through training so hard that he went bald, which is pretty impressive. After he encountered this big crab monster and he was trying to like kill a child, and he was like, I'll save this child and I'll become a hero. And notably, of course, he's also like this sort of depressed, unemployed guy who hates his life. And yeah, it gets pretty gory. I will say this one, like, obviously there's a good bit of gore in this punch, right? Like, there's a big hole in this guy and he's like bits are flying everywhere, but because he's not like, there's not that much like noticeable, because like you can't imagine this, right? There's no way you could imagine the feeling of having a like 2-meter sized hole ripped through you from somebody punching you in the chest. Whereas in this, he has like, the crab guy has like his eye like pulled out of his head. Like, I can imagine that pain in my eye. It's really like horrible, and it's really quite fucking gory, I would say. Almost to a surprising degree. But I think it's also a really good setup. Because I mean, we've all sort of, everyone has dreamed about being a hero, and here's someone who's actually willing to try and realize that in a similar way to something like Kick-Ass or something. And I actually completely forgot about this before the reread. Like, I'd completely forgotten about this, the flashbacks we saw to before he was super duper strong. And it's really nice to see. I think it makes him more grounded just to see this. And we do cut back to it every now and then as well in the story. We see him with hair infrequently, but we still see him, and that makes sure that he stays a grounded character, which I think is great. Anyway, then we have 2 more chapters that are basically just him beating generic bad guys who don't really matter. And again, they give some level of origin to these people, but it doesn't matter. It matters so little that explaining it is a waste of time, like I said. But we also get a good amount of understanding of Saitama, and why is this character, this person who can overwhelm in terms of strength any individual in the world, in existence, in the universe, basically. That's how ridiculously strong he is. Why is he the main character? Because fundamentally, in a simple way, it feels like there wouldn't be an arc here, right? But of course, the twist and almost the satire of it is that it's completely depressing for him, because he lives for being a hero and everything that comes with that sort of stereotype of being a hero, and that includes having these, powerful antagonists, maybe people who keep coming back, which never happens because he always pretty much kills them, or makes them like completely surrender. And additionally, none of the fights are ever close. I mean, he always beats them in one punch. It's almost a curse for him. And it's interesting, of course, because that differs to like a lot of people. If I was that strong and I could beat everyone in one punch, it wouldn't bother me that I wasn't getting any close fights, because I don't sort of place that much value in strength. But the thing is, obviously, he's placed all of his value in physical strength and physical, the ability to fight. That's what his training has been for. That's what his whole life revolves around in that regard. And that's why he has this view that he has to get competition. He has to find some competition of his, and he isn't capable of doing that. It's quite tragic and a little bit depressing, but also it obviously is like philosophy based, like I mentioned. Lots of people in this situation wouldn't be in the sort of predicament he's in, because they wouldn't mind. It's just because of Saitama's specific motivation for getting this strong in the first place, and his life philosophy, which is based around that motivation. So after these basic chapters, all of these are just, one chapter, one little story. We start to actually get some more extended stuff. Starting off with this stuff with the House of Evolution, which I think is really where this manga goes from. It's funny and there's an interesting protagonist, but there's nothing exceptional going on here, and it really starts to show that this is like a really strong story that's there to be told. It's not just some weird you know, it's a gimmick, he beats them in one punch. There's a lot more to it than that. And the most obvious facet of that is the existence of Genos, who is essentially um, a traditional superhero protagonist, at least in a lot of in like manga, I guess. Maybe not in sort of Western superhero stuff like Marvel, but he certainly is generic. He has this tragic origin where he needs to beat this guy who basically defeated him and killed and, you know, destroyed things that were close to him as a child. And I'll talk about that in a mo. And, you know, he isn't the strongest. We see that he is beaten by this opponent, this like mosquito lady, is able to defeat him, though it's a very close fight. And I think the other thing this shows, actually I'll get to that in a second, but yeah, he's sort of the traditional protagonist, and he is definitely, like, he's the deuteragonist here. There is no one else other than Saitama as significant to this story as Genos. He is really important, but of course what differs him from your traditional sort of superhero protagonist, or just generally action protagonist, is the fact that he is with Saitama. At any moment, Saitama could step into any of the challenges he faces and just, like, beat that guy, or do whatever like that. There is somebody so significantly strong, and they are basically besties, right? So it's like that changes how he views the world compared to this sort of stereotypical protagonist, and simultaneously it completely changes the stakes for him, and that's great because it means that a lot more of the growth he receives isn't physical. He also has, like, you know, he learns lessons and he gains insight and things like that, which is much more interesting. At least to me, I'm much more interested in stuff like that. And of course the same is true of Saitama, because he doesn't need to grow any stronger. He can just continue to be as strong as he is. He can only grow internally, which is actually really great, because that's what I like to see. I don't really care as much about how strong people are a lot of the time. It makes for cool action, but it's nothing more than that. And I mean, this is the other thing. This is where the cool action comes in. Genos being such an important character and being present a lot of the time means that there is good action in this manga consistently, as well as consistently that great joke of Saitama beating people instantly. They have a good mix of both, because Genos is always there to struggle. Essentially, as a narrative device, he's great because it provides us with good action as well as the funny action. And in this case, this fight with the mosquito, out of the fights in the first 15 chapters, I have to say it's probably my favorite, because Genos has an interesting little moveset, a lot of sort of energy blast type attacks and stuff, and the mosquito concept is actually really great. This like giant mosquito who sends out little mosquitoes and they like suck stuff up. I like it a lot. I'm not going to go into specifics because I'm really bad at recounting them, and I don't like recounting them, but like the action in this is really great. It lasts, if I were to try and get it, I think it lasts like half a chapter and then another. Basically lasts one chapter but across two chapters, because it starts about halfway through one and ends about halfway through the other. And it's just really great, consistent stuff. And we do cut to Saitama just fucking around as well, trying to kill this mosquito or whatever. And then of course he shows up and he beats them in one slap man in this case, and he's naked because of some bullshit. And then of course Genos, as someone who similarly to Saitama places a lot of value in how strong he is, immediately wants to learn everything he can from him so he can become just as strong, which is of course impossible for him. I don't think anyone can become as strong as Saitama, if I had to guess. I'm honestly, I mean, this is maybe going too, I may be thinking too far ahead here, but I could envision this manga ending without him ever meeting somebody as strong as him, and still working, because you could easily lead it into a sort of moment of realization that that isn't what matters, because I mean, in my opinion, it isn't. You know, it's interesting. I think it's definitely interesting. So yeah, Saitama takes Genos on as basically his disciple, but really they just kind of eventually become friends, and they're really the only friends each other has, at least that we see. And I mean, Saitama definitely doesn't have any other friends. That's not to be like rude or anything, but you know, he's kind of consumed by adult life. That's certainly an idea that is covered a lot here. Like in between his role as a superhero, he has to, you know, be a functioning member of society, and that's quite difficult to balance. And as a result, he kind of ends up friendless, which is a bit unfortunate, but I mean, I guess it's sort of a hazard. And it's definitely part of the reason, even if the manga never says this, but it's definitely part of the reason he doesn't enjoy life anymore. The fact that he's basically never able to socialize has to be a part of it, right? And Genos helps with that, I would say. So that's great as well. There's lots to say about this. I really like their dynamic, but I mean, I don't have that much to say on it yet because we haven't gotten to much of the manga yet. And then there's a great joke, which after rereading, I actually went and watched a singular scene from the anime, which is this exact joke in the anime, because I wanted to see how they handled it. Because obviously the thing about the joke here, how do I explain this? I'll start by explaining what happens in the anime when I was watching this scene. So basically you have to listen to the entire thing, and since there's not much else to do, it's inevitable that you're gonna, like for me, I'm gonna read the subtitles. So I read the entire backstory in full, like this whole thing pretty much. So then when the joke comes in, there's a disconnect between me and Saitama, because it's obvious that Saitama wasn't listening, but I was listening because I didn't have another option, right? So there's a disconnect between me and Saitama, and the joke doesn't land as heavily because of this. Whereas in the manga, I just skipped over the whole thing, right? I like skimmed it. It took maybe 10 seconds for me to read. I just read like I was a normal human, and then I just read like one word per line, pretty much. I read cyborg, and of course it helps that I could remember the backstory to a degree, but like, even on first read, I imagine I skipped through quite a lot of this. I couldn't tell you for sure. And that means that there's a connection between the reader and Saitama when the punchline comes in and he gets mad and is like short in it, which makes it funnier. Like, this is a really, really great joke. And of course, it's just a great joke in general, because these types of backstories often aren't particularly interesting. And to be honest, as much as I love Genos as a character, this backstory only serves to explain why he has the sort of personality of this stereotypical manga protagonist, and there isn't really anything else to it. You know, it's not that important to remember. I mean, later there's set up that it maybe is important, and I'll get to that when I need to, but for now, it's completely irrelevant to anything else. So yeah, I mean, feel free to give it a read if you're watching this and you've never read One Punch Man. It's irrelevant. I wouldn't bother. Anyway, we're then introduced to our first sort of major villain. He's the scientist guy who's like making all these mutants. The mosquito being an example, and then there's these other three who show up and Saitama beats them instantly. But I feel like anyone could have done that. And the pay for the ceiling joke, that's probably the funniest moment that thus far, I would say. Up to this point in the manga, this is the funniest joke. Because I completely forgot it happened, right? And it made me laugh out loud when I was reading. It's great. Because of course you would be annoyed if something like that happened. But obviously, if we're looking at a regular superhero story that isn't satirical, someone crashes through the ceiling, they just stop fighting. There's no remark on the ceiling. And the fact that Saitama is strong is really the only reason that the statement can, you know, be excused in the first place. There's no other, you know, if he wasn't this strong, would he be able to make that? No, he'd be too busy worrying about his life. So that's great as well. And there's these other two. I just put them there to remind me that they exist. But again, it doesn't matter. We never even see them fight or anything. Pooh. More notably are these three. So this guy's actually like a gorilla. He's got a helmet on right now. And he's also a cyborg. And he has a little fight with Genos. I will say this one's not amazing. They don't show as much of it or anything. And Genos is able to win this time, actually, which I thought was interesting. Because he says he's the third strongest. And the second strongest is the lion. And the first strongest comes later. So it's interesting that the mosquito isn't in the top 3 but could beat Genos, but Genos can beat this guy who is in the top 3. I'm not saying that's like a huge issue or anything, but I did pick up on it. It just feels a bit weird. Either way, I mean, first of all, it's a cool design. I haven't pointed that out yet, but all of these like uninteresting and completely irrelevant villains, they actually have great designs. Like consistently, they look interesting, and if they were in a different manga, they probably would be interesting. If it weren't for the fact that they are intentionally uninteresting for the joke, basically. Anyway, there's sort of a vague illusion of a threat very briefly when he gets like pulled underground by this mole guy, but he just like climbs out of the ground. He like climbs out of the concrete basically. But there's like an almost brief illusion of stakes, which I like because it means that they can re-subvert. You know, anytime there's any sort of perceived threat towards Saitama, there's that creates a new opportunity to subvert it and have him just win again, and that is another successful joke basically. And this is the first example of that. This is a situation where, ooh, can he get out of this situation? It's quite unique, and of course he can. Anyway, he beats this lion guy, and then there's a good joke where the gorilla's like, ah, you'll never beat the lion guy. And then Saitama shows up and is like, I just beat the lion guy. And then I'm butchering the delivery here, but it's great as well. This is a funny series of events. That's something I really need to communicate. This manga is probably the funniest manga I've read, possibly. It's really, really funny. Yeah, I love it a lot. Now, at this point we were at the end of the first volume, I'm pretty sure, and because of that we get a little cutaway to Saitama as a kid, and I think this was really, really interesting. First of all, it introduces Moomin Rider, who I like a lot. There isn't anything else to say really, but I do like the fact that him and Saitama are like, technically probably knew each other as children, like vaguely, since they were in the same year at school. Like obviously they're not going to be like friends or anything, but you know, it sets up the idea that they probably did know each other, which is useful for re-establishing their relationship later, because they do, you know, speak to each other. I really like this I don't know how to live panel, because it shows that Saitama was always kind of out of it, right? Even before he decided to become a hero, he was like struggling to a degree, and then that helps explain why he's so disappointed in his life now that he's strong as well, because when he finally came up with the idea of becoming a superhero, he ended up in this, you know, setting this unrealistic expectation that he would finally understand sort of what life was about and be in this position where he could be, you know, he was like a person, I guess, is like a weird way of putting it, because I can't think of a better way of wording it, but you know, there is a better way. I can't think of the words, but that, you know what I mean, right? He sets this expectation that it's gonna fix everything, and then it doesn't, and that helps explain why he's in this sort of emotionless state. He now can't think of anything. The only thing he can like latch onto is the idea that he needs to find a sort of worthy opponent, and then things will be fixed. But in reality, that's probably not going to be the solution, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. And I feel like that's kind of becomes more and more obvious throughout the story. But we also get our first real joke of the sort of balancing being a superhero with being a non-superhero joke, where he forgot to put that to the trash, man. Oh my god, that's pretty poor from Saitama, to be honest, but like it's funny, and it's a running gag, I guess, in that regard, so it's good to establish, even if it's weird to have the first of its kind. At least I think so, because I didn't notice any before this, other than I guess Pay for the Ceiling, which is a bit different. In the actual volume, like the first instance of this joke is in a bonus chapter, which I think is maybe a little unusual, but I still appreciate it. Yeah. So this is really important. This is the first backstory that actually matters, because it has like an effect on the messaging of the story itself, beyond, oh, look at this, it's a satire, being the message, right? The theme related to this guy, who I can't lie, if they mention his name, I forgot it immediately, so I'm just gonna call him Evolution Guy or something, well, I guess. So Evolution Guy, he was like the scientist, he's trying to artificially evolve people. I mean, you can read what it says on the screen, and then he like de-aged himself and then cloned himself like a million billion times and started making all these weird like animal hybrid creatures and stuff. But importantly, this artificial evolution is rooted in the same motivation as Saitama. It is to create like strength. It is based on excessively valuing physical strength in people. Although in this case it's a slightly more broad thing because there are other like aspects that he wants to make sure are evolved. I would imagine. It's just never shown. But of course, in his case, that perception of strength as the most important sort of facet of life has basically corrupted him into being evil, to put it simply. He creates these creatures and then sends them out to kill people, whereas Saitama has placed that value into a position of good, and therefore he uses it for good. So I think that's interesting, because it means that there's a mirror here, right? It's not a particularly strong one, it's not one that you may instantly pick up on, but it's still subtly present, and I really enjoy that the first real villain of One Punch Man is somebody who has parallels with Saitama. And it helps that he doesn't look particularly odd. You know, I mean, his hair sucks, but it's, you know, it's not particularly out there or anything. And he has a pretty generic face and facial features. And he's wearing generic clothes. I mean, you know, him and Saitama are the only characters of note so far in the story who that applies to. So yeah, another parallel can be found there. I think it's pretty great. Anyway, so Saitama and Genos, they hear about this guy from the gorilla, and they go to his headquarters. There's a good little joke here, which I think is a great, I mean, it's great characterization as well for both Genos and Saitama, and how they think. So for Genos, it's all about getting it done. To him, it's less about being a hero and more about delivering justice in concept, I guess. So when they get to the sort of lab thing that's just in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, which is, I think, is a little strange, but anyway, he just blows it up immediately before they can do anything. Which is sensible, right? If you want to get rid of these evil people, that's the smartest way of going about it. Just get rid of them like that, bang, done, they're gone. But Saitama is kind of sad, because, you know, you destroyed all this sort of guard stuff, and for him, it's about being a hero. It's about the experience of being a hero, which is more than just delivering justice. There have to be, you know, these classic sort of hero tropes and things, like having to break into this dangerous facility without just blowing up all the defenses immediately. And since he isn't even able to see the preparations, it's sad, and that's great characterization for both Saitama and Genos, which is great considering that they're the main two characters, you know. Just saying, it's excellent stuff. And then we meet Carnage Kabuto, who is the sort of best evolved thing. All the others are like based off animals, but I really could not tell you what animal is this guy. I mean, it's really strange. If I had to put money on it, it would probably be some sort of insect, weirdly. But he only has 4 legs, right? That's not an insect. So yeah, I'm a little confused by it, but I mean, I love the design though. He's very intimidating. I like that he has a clear, like, human face, but it's not like uncanny. In spite of the fact that he's basically just an animal with a human face. Simultaneously not uncanny. That's pretty great. Yeah, and this guy, he's basically all about killing. So again, there's almost a parallel to Saitama because he views strength as the ability to just kill indiscriminately, whereas for Saitama it's specifically about defeating evil, I guess. But yeah, yet another character whose entire understanding of the world is that strength is like the most important thing, when that isn't really the case. And yeah, he has a little fight with Genos. It's very one-sided. Genos is nowhere near strong enough. He doesn't even damage him. It's not like the fight with the mosquito lady. It's done very quickly as well. And it's not exactly what I would call an exciting action piece, because even before he does really do anything, it's obvious that he's gonna lose. Partly just because it's primed for him to fight Saitama, and partly because, I mean, we already saw that he was struggling against the gorilla and the mosquito, and this guy's definitely supposed to be stronger. I mean, yeah. But I still think it's worth establishing, because it really does show Genos is always interested in making sure that he can be involved, I guess. He kind of gets taken out unawares, and then afterwards he comes back into the fight. Even though he's basically already knows he will lose, he still has to get in there. He still has to try. I really appreciate that as a personality trait for Genos. I think he's a really great character, man. Yeah. I was a little skeptical of him the first time I read this. I was a bit worried that he would annoy me, but it really quickly shows, like, he's not going to be annoying. You know, he's going to be cool. You're going to like him, even if he's not going to be as likable as Saitama, because he's not like a relatable person particularly. He's not unrelatable, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So him and Kabuto, they have a little tussle, and then we get the big matchup between him and Saitama. First of all, I only put this panel on the left on because I love it. It looks great, right? It looks so good. I mean, he just looks amazing. He looks amazing in it, and it also stands in contrast with this next panel, because of the art, which I haven't pointed out yet, but there's two very distinct styles for drawing Saitama, right? Everyone else is drawn in one style, and it's more similar to the style of Saitama on the left. But a lot of the time, Saitama looks like the guy on the right, and they look very different. Those aren't the same person, right? They have completely different head shape, eye shape, nose shape, mouth shape. Everything is different. And I think that's really great. How am I going to explain this? I haven't thought about it, and now I'm stuck trying to find the right way of just saying why I like this. Okay, so nope. I thought that might trigger it to just happen, but no. Okay, so I think the reason it's great is predominantly, I mean, obviously it's mostly for comedic purposes. He looks like that because it's silly, and then it's in contrast with the thing. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I think he looks like the guy on the left, right? To everyone else, that's what he looks like all the time. So when we see him like this, it's almost that we're viewing him from that outside perspective. In this case, I think probably this is what Genos is perceiving from Saitama, this sort of heroic energy as he walks up to Kabuto. And then in contrast, this panel, although the panel is from the perspective of Kabuto, the actual drawing in the art is from the perspective of Saitama, because this is Saitama saying, huh? You know? I don't know how else to explain it. It's from the perspective of Kabuto because we're thinking inside his head, but the art is from the perspective of Saitama because of how he looks. And whenever we look at Saitama just as an audience rather than through any sort of character's eyes or through Saitama's eyes, he looks like this, and I think that's an interesting contrast. And I guess I'll leave it at that because I don't really know how to describe what it means. And I feel stupid for that, but I mean, it's clearly there for a reason, right? Anyway. Then we get this great joke about his training and how he basically did nothing. Like, he did something any human could do, and he just did it for 3 years, and then he became really strong. It's great. I think it's a really funny joke. I think they do try to explain it further later in the manga. I can't really remember. And I'm sorry to say, but that, like, completely sucks. They just need to leave it at this. It just needs to stay this funny little joke. There's no need for an explanation beyond this as to why he's so strong. Yeah. Also, some of this stuff is weird. Like the no heating, no air conditioning. That seems unnecessary to me. But I mean, it evidently maybe that's the difference. I don't know anyone in the real world who's doing that, so maybe that's why none of them are as strong as him. And then we get a much better version of the garbage day joke with the bargain day. There's a number of reasons this is great. First of all, it was set up earlier in the arc that he needed to be back from this sort of adventure to defeat the evolution guy before the next day, or he would miss bargain day. And then that's why he ends the fight with Kabuto basically early, because he wants to let Kabuto fuck around a bit beforehand. Which is great. And then although it's only one panel, the evolution guy's character is also resolved. He basically comes to the conclusion that it's useless for him to try and pursue reaching this high strength because there are clearly ways beyond his understanding that are like involved in it, I guess is the simple way of putting it. I think I'm going to explain this. I'm going to butcher my explanation of this. But yeah, so this isn't a completion of like the arc in a traditional sense, right? Because really the conclusion you would maybe want him to come to is that maybe placing all your sort of I'm really struggling with words right now. What is going on with me? Basically, prioritizing strength over everything else maybe isn't the most sensible thing he can be doing, and since he's such a great scientist, he should be going off and doing something else. And I guess we kind of get that, but we don't maybe get it as explicitly as I would hope. But at the same time, it barely matters, because he's not like an important character or anything. He's basically just a guy in the background. I mean, he's only in like 3 scenes, he has like 10 lines. Even if he is the main antagonist of this arc, I guess, he's less important to the story than Kabuto is, almost. Yeah. Oh, I completely forgot to talk about the actual subjects of the panel on the right in this slide, didn't I? I forgot to talk about the fact that Kabuto won't even attack him because his like instincts are telling him he would die instantaneously. Because Saitama is completely open. He's not defending himself at all because he doesn't need to. That's how ridiculously strong he is. He could take any attack and survive. And that's part of the art style in this specific panel works because it makes him seem more harmless than the guy on the left. Anyway, the guy on the left looks like he could kill you in one punch. The guy on the right looks like a silly guy dressed up for fun. But simultaneously, he's terrifying. The weirdly bold lines as well in this specific panel are great. Anyway, importantly, that says a lot. I think this is the real first confirmation that he is like unbelievably strong. Like obviously the narrative is telling us that, but this is the first time that the internal world is telling us he is absolutely the strongest person. There is no way of beating him, you know? Yeah. Okay, next arc. I'm gonna get through this one much faster than the last one. Mostly because I kind of think it's a little on the weaker side. And also it's a little bit shorter. Importantly though, it does introduce Moomin Rider and Sonic, who are both quite important characters. And we also get this guy Hammerhead and his like sort of gang, who are all bold, which means people keep mistaking Saitama for a member of the gang, which is kind of a decent joke. I wouldn't say it's the best joke in the manga though. This Hammerhead guy, his motivation is just basically that he doesn't want to get a job, so he decides to take over the world and abolish jobs or something. And they have these like power suit things. Yeah. Anyway, we meet Moomin Rider very, very briefly. Obviously, we already technically met him in the like bonus chapter thing, but like this is where we really get to meet him. And he gets beaten immediately. We learn that, you know, there are a lot of heroes in this world, but not all of them are as fortunate as Saitama, you know. Some of them are really weak. This guy's not anything like Genos either. That mosquito lady would kill him in seconds. But I mean, yeah, there's nothing else to say for now. That'll come back in another video, you know. As for Sonic, I think he is a great character who's introduced really well. He's the real focus of the arc, not these fucking boldies. As this assassin who's incredibly fast, which introduces us to a new facet of Saitama's strength, which we haven't really uncovered, which is that he's incredibly fast. I mean, we see it happen a couple of times, but like, this is the first time that it's focused on, I guess. Up until now, it's all been about the physical strength. He can't take damage and he can beat people in one punch, but he's also so fast that he'll never miss if he attacks you. That's how fast he is. And yeah. But anyway, with Sonic, also he's got a personality, you know. He's also, I mean, you'll never guess. He also thinks that strength is more important than everything else. It's almost like that's a trend in like every single character in the story, even though I think the manga agrees with me here. That isn't true at all. It's kind of a ridiculous way of thinking. And I mean, Sonic seems very ridiculous. Like, he's always grinning, and he's just very unusual. He's you know, and this is somebody who isn't likable either. I mean, he's likable as a character, but not as a person, if you know what I mean. And that's all because of that prioritization. Unlike Saitama, again, he isn't likable, even though they have the same philosophy. And partly that's because he never achieved the peak of that philosophy, because he's not the strongest. Though he does beat up all the bullies, apart from the main guy, in probably the second best fight scene yet. Behind Genos versus Mosquito, this is probably my second favorite, even though it's pretty one-sided. Sonic wins this pretty handily. There's just some really great visuals. I picked this panel on purpose. This is brutal, but it's also really well drawn. I like it a lot. Also, that's King. I didn't obviously notice that on first read. But yeah, that's King showing up early, which is awesome. You know, what else is there to say? I think that's amazing. Probably maybe not intentional, but it's really great foreshadowing, maybe, I guess you could say. Yeah, I just think it's cool. It's just a cool little Easter egg that he's in a little offside panel thing. Anyway, the main guy gets away because of his big bald head. And then he runs into Saitama, who's obviously pissed off because he keeps getting confused because he's also bold. He beats this guy really easily. He takes some punches and then he just like breaks this guy's like suit pretty much like that. There's not much else to say. There's this panel down here which I thought was interesting. So this is his regard for bald guy, who ends up like running away naked and then he gets like caught by the police or something. But like, and I kind of get it because it is similar to Saitama in like the very early flashbacks. This is like if Saitama never decided to become a hero. But I also think he's maybe overreacting a little bit here. Like they're not that similar. I think, because I don't think there's Saitama doesn't have a desire to work, right? Like the bald guy, his motivation comes from laziness, but Saitama, he's like trying to get a job in those flashbacks. He wants to fit in with society. That's like a clear difference between him and Baldy. But yeah, I guess it's maybe one step away. But I think maybe, yeah, not quite the comparison the manga thinks it is, maybe. Anyway, then we get a little fight between Saitama and Sonic. There's not much to say here. I don't know why I included that as a separate slide, really. Saitama accidentally hits Sonic in the balls, and then he's really hurt. Also, this panel's fucking terrifying. Like this panel here is uncanny. This one is intentionally uncanny and it looks cool. This one is kind of unintentionally uncanny. It is terrifying. Yeah. But yeah, this hitting him in the ball stroke is really great as well. It's not like laugh out loud funny, but it does make me smile a lot. Although I'm also obviously sympathizing very hard because that's gotta absolutely kill. Anyway, final stuff of note, I guess. After this, Saitama realizes that people don't know who he is, in spite of him being a hero, and that isn't fitting in with his hero fantasy, because obviously people like Superman, Batman, within their own verse, they are famous, they are celebrities, everyone knows who they are, no one knows who Saitama is, even though he's the strongest. And as it turns out, there's a whole hero association, and they go get registered. Whoa, set up for the next bit. And that's really all there is to say. I mean, I think it's a great setup, and I think that the concept of the association in of itself is interesting. And I also like that the credit goes to Moomin Rider, because it's just so ridiculous, because he got beaten up in like 10 seconds, and he was beaten up in public as well, like everyone knows. But, I mean, yeah. I don't have anything else to say there, so, yeah. That's it. So, yeah, overall thoughts on this one? I mean, it's short and it's mostly set up. It's mostly to introduce characters like Saitama and Genos and make sure we understand them before they can introduce a lot more concepts and build out the world a bit more, because it's sort of all happening in almost a vacuum up until this point. It's very funny. The art is great. Not necessarily like it's amazingly drawn, but it's stylistically incredibly strong. And I mean, there's not much else to add. I think this is just a great piece of introductory storytelling, really. And if I had to give this individual section of the story a numerical score, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. For setup, this is really, really strong stuff. And yeah, great. In terms of what I'm going to do with this, I don't think I'm going to go saga by saga, because this is definitely going to be the smallest of the sagas, and I want to try and keep it in relatively small chunks, maybe like 1 or 2 arcs at a time, depending on the length of the arc. So I guess we'll see. Either way, we'll go through the sort of basics of the Hero Association next, and see where we go from there. I'm expecting this won't take too long to get through, but, you know, I'm going on holiday soon, which will cause a bit of a delay in these videos. And yeah, that's all I have to say, I think. Right, bye.